Everybody. It's the fourth live series this week in our Humanising Work Live Series with Bailey and French. I'm joined today by the wonderful Nikki Ailes. Thank you for joining us, Nikki. We're going to be talking about team goals, specifically, and the difference between team goals and personal or organisational goals, and why that's important for humanising the world of work, but also specifically focusing in on teams this week. We talked about human leadership last week, and this live series is available on all our channels, on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube, on Facebook, as well as being recorded for our new podcast series, which is available on multiple platforms, including Spotify. So welcome to everyone who's watching us live. Please do let us know your questions, comments and thoughts come through in the comments box. And for anyone who is listening to the recording, you can still get in touch with us through all those different channels. Just pop us a message. Thank you for joining us. So hello, Nikki. How are you doing? Do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Alex. Lovely to be here. Yes, so my name's Nikki. I'm, how would I class myself? Positive psychologist, probably first and foremost, as well as a coach, a wellbeing practitioner, resilience practitioner, leadership coach, strengths coach. So lots of different kind of strings to my bow, if you like, but they generally all come together in terms of helping people to be their best selves, which is obviously where we come from a positive psychology place. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm so glad you're here today, because actually that's just brilliant experience to bring to the conversation, because a lot of our work is informed by positive psychology. We focus most of it on the evidence-based element of the research, which is really important to us around this humanising work theme, which is a really big kind of ambitious goal for us. And so what we're really trying to do is break that down into, you know, a level of granularity around, okay, what does that really mean for leadership? And we talked all last week about human leadership and using the latest, most relevant and positive ways to develop our human leadership approach through emotional intelligence, which is an old model, but a good one. And equally as relevant then is how can we humanise the workplace in our teams? And so this week we're talking about all the different conditions that are needed for team flow. And flow is different for individuals than it is for teams. You know, we know lots of ways that individuals can get into flow when we're totally absorbed in something. We lose track of time. We're enjoying using our strengths. We're at peak performance. And also we have a reduction in our levels of anxiety when we're in flow. So there's lots of benefits on an individual basis. And Bailey and French, we're pioneering a new focus on extending that to teams. And so starting to explore what are the conditions for team flow. And we moved on from focusing on kind of our own space within the team over the last few sessions to talking today about alignment and why it's so important to be all aligned together in one direction. To be able to flow together, because clearly we could all flow separately, but that doesn't make us a team. So how do teams flow together? And one of those key ways is having team goals. Now, Nikki, I'm sure you've been part of teams before, and it's very easy to assume that because you've got your own personal goals that are maybe tied to your career or your role, as well as, you know, how they fit into the overall organizational goals, that it's an assumption that everyone knows what the team goals are, isn't it? And actually, absolutely, they're not always that explicit or even that aligned.
No. And I think even more so at the moment, as I was reflecting on what you were saying, you know, what we were talking about earlier, because I think everybody has been in this remote space. There's so many people that I've been talking to that have only just started working in a team during the last 12 months. So they haven't even physically met the other people that they work with in their team yet. They've only met them virtually. Yeah. So it must be so hard for those people who've not actually kind of lived and breathed the culture of an organization to feel that they're part of that team, as well as understand, you know, what some of those team goals are and where they fit within those. So yeah, absolutely. I think over the next few months, as things start to change and evolve again, that people will start to be thinking about this idea of how do we make sure everybody is aligned, and especially these new starters feel like they're on board and they know how they can contribute, and that their goals fit within the bigger whole team goal.
Absolutely. And we know that lots of people have moved roles, haven't they? And lots of teams have got new members to them, whether they're expanding or whether they've, replacing people who've left. We know that there's lots of newness, and that's fantastic, but it's completely inefficient to not bring people together and help them really focus on finding clarity as a team. And I think the thing that strikes me certainly from my career when I was part of internally part of very large organizations, planning goes on for a long time. And, the strategic plans that are drawn together with fantastic minds put to them are helpful for focus and for clarity, and individuals can find their own clarity around those. But really coming together and harnessing, okay, so what does that mean for this team? What would be really great for us to do and to align on focusing on together, even if we're all doing very separate different things? How do we go about setting goals together in a positive way so that people actually feel that they're able to contribute, that they're able to collaborate, that they've got something valuable to be able to work on with others at such, exactly as you said, such an important time? How would you suggest people go about actually setting team goals separately from organizational goals?
I think one of the really interesting, and I know you were talking to Dan and Matthew about this earlier in the week in terms of strengths, but I think strength is a real opportunity to do exactly that in terms of setting team goals, because I think a lot of the time, as you say, people can kind of be going along in their own little silos. They know what their own goals are, they know what their own strengths are, but they're not aware of what other people in the team can bring. And I think when that sort of switch happens in some people's heads, and I've been working with an organisation in the last couple of weeks actually who started to think about this, where they think actually if we start to pool everybody's strengths and we start to think about what individuals can contribute, it's sort of that whole is greater than the sum of its parts piece. So we can start to set ourselves team goals that leverage everybody's strengths within the team, and that allow if we've got any gaps, we don't like calling them weaknesses, I know, but whatever we like to call them, development opportunities or sort of areas of potential, then you can sort of do this wonderful jigsaw of putting people together so that any of those weaknesses become irrelevant, because everybody can kind of work together and harmonize. I think it's that you use that phrase, don't you, the starling murmuration, so that you almost kind of fit together, almost like those starlings have their little place in the flow. So I think strengths definitely is one way, and being aware of each of the strengths and thinking more as teams about when we're putting together a project, when we're thinking about a particular piece of work, where we can cleverly use people's strengths and allow them to get into flow individually, and then obviously we'll be in better flow as a team, I think.
And it's brilliant to talk about this actually, because certainly my passion around the field of strengths has been long lasting since, the beginning of my career, a very long time ago. And what I still find interesting is that whilst there's so many more organizations that have now embraced a strengths approach than when I first started working in this field, which is fantastic, and I absolutely love it, a lot of them have stopped once they've discovered their strengths. They've done the whole, right, oh no, I've done the book, I've done the test, I know what my strengths are, let's move on. And I'm like, well, actually the power of what you've done and invested is only really valuable in terms of performance and outcomes for everybody, in terms of well-being as well as in terms of profit for the organization, if we actually apply that into our workplace. And so many people make assumptions, don't they, that people know what their strengths are, that people know what other people's strengths are, that we know how to use those on a daily basis. And actually, if we haven't learnt about it from our own personal experience and our own language, actually, it can just feel like another one of those models, another away day that we did, where we did another chart. And actually, putting it into practice is the most important thing. So I love what you're talking about there, about actually we can align together using our strengths within team goals, because that's really powerful. But also there's a connection there to, similar to what we were talking about the other day with strengths, is the confidence that it gives. If I think about my personal situation over the last year, there's been some big ups and downs on the journey that we've all been through. And there's been points where I've lost confidence, where my self-esteem has been lower than other days. And I think that's a natural ebb and flow for lots of people. And I wonder, you know, coming together to create team goals and feel like you contribute and being able to talk about what you do best might actually really help people with their confidence, because it can be assumed that people will bring that. But actually, if they haven't had a platform to explicitly talk about it, they might think it's not required, or it's not wanted, or it's not valued.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that makes me think of as well, when you're talking about this sort of area of confidence and sort of almost motivation, is when we're thinking about team goals versus personal goals as well, this whole sort of Rick Snyder willpower idea. So, you know, we can be really great at setting our goals and we might be able to envisage the pathways to getting there, but there will be times when we perhaps find it hard, we hit a barrier or an obstacle, or we lose our confidence, or we find something difficult. And I think, as you were saying, if people are leveraging their strengths as part of that kind of goal process, that's going to help with some of that, you know, grit and growth mindset and all of that wonderful stuff that helps us, you know, keep focused and passion and perseverance towards those goals. But I think almost within teams, you've got that amplified because you've got each other as well in terms of that support. So all of that kind of positive feedback, helping to counteract any sort of negative self-talk or worries and concerns about, are we going in the right direction, or was this a kind of failure, or what can we learn from it? So I think that whole idea about confidence, I think, is also, you know, a real benefit of team goals and kind of working together in a team, being aware of each other's strengths, supporting each other, collaboration, all of that wonderful stuff in terms of maintaining some of that willpower towards those goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm very, very passionate about actually around this kind of new focus for us with Team Flow is that so many team effectiveness models are so focused on performance, and we are focused on performance, but hand in hand with well-being. And the fact that, you know, it's not about just having a bunch of high performing individuals that are all essentially, you know, fueled on adrenaline, focused on so much that eventually they'll just burn out one by one, and we're replacing, but actually focusing on long-term sustainable performance, because that's what's really going to matter here. You know, businesses are in a difficult situation right now to get through to the long term, and we've got to have those longer term goals. But the only way to do that is to rely on the support of a team collaborating together, and everyone, and I think more people have recognized this certainly in the last year, that everyone is going to face challenges. Everyone is going to have their resilience challenged at some point. So we have to, as a team, be able to manage how we're working together and collaborating together. And the more explicit we are in sharing our goals and our focus, the more someone can help us and pick us up when we are experiencing those dips, because everybody does. So as Siobhan said, you know, loving the honesty, it is honest actually that most people have dips. Now that's much more proactive, isn't it? And that's what I love about positive psychology, the proactive focus, the strategic focus on how can we develop ourselves, our team to be resilient and strong and focused on our goals that can go up and down over time, so that we can meet those challenges head on without feeling like every time we're knocking us back and then having to get up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something, it links to this other idea. So I've been looking at Scott Barry Kaufman. He's been doing kind of some work around re-envisaging, you know, Abraham Maslow's work and transcendence and all this sort of thing. And, you know, kind of one of the things that he was talking about, and I think other people are talking about, is that sometimes we can overly focus on, as you were saying, the kind of performance goals, when actually what we could be doing, possibly more of as a team, is thinking about some of those process goals, as you say, so some of those learning goals, and giving ourselves the chance as a team to learn together and kind of support each other and, you know, learn new ways of working, learn new skills. And I think, again, that can be something really powerful that can help us achieve the best as a team, rather than just that constant focus on where we're trying to get to, that end goal, which, as you say, might not be, everybody in the team may not be as passionate about that end goal, but everyone can be passionate about kind of learning together and what some of the process goals might be along.
I love that. And that's really important, isn't it? And so I've just put up this question around how can team goals be more effective at achieving success? And I guess it really depends on how you define success, because
Yes,
success can
absolutely.
be exactly as you said, kind of that lifelong learning focus on growth and evolving as an individual. And that doesn't need to happen on a yearly basis. That can happen every hour of every day. We are absolutely capable of growing continuously as human beings. And I keep coming back to this kind of human nature of us being part of this world of a natural world that is about growth and evolution. That's one of the things that makes us a living being, is that we continue to grow. And so really having that at the heart of a team around our goals, absolutely, it helps us, approach mistakes and failure with a much better resilient outcome in terms of, this is all about us continually evolving and growing, and not just in our work lives, but in our personal lives too. And so defining what success is success all about, achieving the end kind of productivity or performance piece? No, actually, it's probably more about getting there together, being well, being able to get there without burning out, being able to achieve success without having to have almost like, as I said, that kind of like the well-being focus of like picking us up when we're falling over is being far more strategic and proactive, and blending that into our everyday ways of working, so that people feel really good about their work, and it's not a sprinkle on top afterwards,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, just sort of that idea of doing things together, those kind of learning goals together. So we're learning more about ourselves, but also learning more about ourselves as a team. And I think maybe, thinking as leaders as well, how can leaders think about setting more team goals that are about these learning goals or these process goals rather than that end goal? So that, and again, everyone will then, depending on how we define success, but feel that they are getting these little wins along the process, which we all know obviously is great for motivation and self-esteem and all of these other things which lead into flow and well-being. And so I think there's lots around that. Sometimes overly focusing on the end goal, people can miss out on a massive opportunity in the meantime, in terms of that pathway along the road.
Absolutely. So I've just put a new one up. So how can people make the best team goals? And I think there's something here about what are the practical, we've talked about strengths, we've talked about, supporting each other's well-being. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts of kind of team goals. Is this a weekly thing? Is this a monthly thing? How often and how regular do we need to talk about goals as a team? And how do we review them if they're learning goals? What if we get put off, get off track and we end up doing something else, but that's also successful? What's the best approach that's positive for people to exactly that brings motivation, that brings well-being to people's focus on where they're heading?
So I think there's definitely something about, again, it depends, like we said before, how we define success, how do we define the best, but I think there's something around this kind of shared passion for the end goal. But that probably is back to your, how often do you do that? That's probably less often. So when you get together and say, what are we trying to achieve, whether it's about, a performance output or something related to an overall business result, or how we work together as a team, that end goal is probably, 6 months out or 12 months out, or however far it is into the future. I think there's something really important about the process of everyone feeling that they can contribute towards envisaging that. All of that wonderful stuff about goal visualization and what will it look like and what will it feel like, and that helps in terms of alignment and motivation. So I think, that sort of setting goals as a team and it being a collaborative process in terms of the end goal, I think is really important. But as you say, that's probably it's less frequent. Whereas some of these sort of smaller goals that we need to have to kind of help us get there. So there's sort of, back to Rick Snyder, the sort of the way power bit, what are the pathways to get there? I think, again, there's an element of flexibility, as we were saying before. So helping each other to understand that it might not be a kind of really linear straight line from A to B to C and then we get to the end goal, that actually it might be more of a kind of a wiggly line. There might be more of a path where we try one thing, as you and I were talking about earlier, try something, it doesn't quite work. So what can we learn from it? We can do something else. So I think setting the sub goals, if you like, again, is important to think about. Those different brains in a team can envisage different ways of getting there. So what could be the different options, and remaining flexible within that team to have little review points along the way to step back and say, okay, so how are we getting on with this particular sub goal? What have we learned? Do we need to course correct a little bit? Do we need to adjust? So I think that sort of lovely richness of learning that comes with the flexibility of, not that tunnel vision of we've got to get to that end goal as quickly as humanly possible, and more about, what can we do along the way that's going to help us achieve the goal, but also allow us to perhaps learn as a team, or collaborate better, and improve where we get to in terms of the end goal because of everything we've experimented with along the way.
And I wonder as well, kind of with this focus on teams rather than the leader, obviously it includes the leader, yes, but it doesn't have to, does it? And so, it can be that people can say, regardless of the organizational goals and the personal goals that are there, anyone can initiate a team goals conversation. And also the other piece is the continuation of these types of conversations if some people aren't present. And I think this is a really important piece to kind of tackle, is that we often see things get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back until everyone is free. And what that means is that there isn't the regularity, because ultimately there's always going to be something happening that means that someone can't join in for some reason or other. But there's no reason we can't pick that up later. But keeping that regularity, that consecutive consistency, the focus, the knowledge that this is going to be reviewed, that we are going to talk about it again, that it's not a wasted effort as a one-off team away day, for example. But also to allow for the increased flexibility in dispersed teams now, where people are working different hours, different locations, using our platforms more cleverly, really, isn't it? And being able to be efficient with those to share goals in different ways rather than maybe all being present physically.
And again, I think it's about being clever, about allowing some of those kind of conversations to be a little bit more organic. Because as you say, there's so many businesses, I'm sure you're the same, so many businesses I've worked within or with, and they spend all the time with the kind of big goal visualization from the away day, and then kind of it doesn't get talked about thereafter. And everyone sorts of understands where we're trying to get to and where we might be on that journey. But it's, as you say, very left up to the leaders to then have a big internal comms day to kind of communicate where we are versus this goal. And whereas I think, as you say, especially with what's happened with flexible working and virtual working, it means that we can be a little bit more open and organic about some of these conversations, and review them, as you say, on a regular basis. And I think everyone then feels like they've got more ownership over those goals and ownership over some of the sub goals to getting there as well. So hopefully the pandemic has opened up some opportunity as well for that kind of more, as you were saying, team ownership of some of these goals, even if it's more about those sub goals and the pathways necessarily than that overall end goal, if that's at a bigger organizational level.
And I wonder, I mean, you're welcome to share if you've got any stories or examples of teams where this has worked really well, where maybe you've had people together talking about their strengths and they've been able to kind of almost identify new things that they're capable of doing. And so much for me, what I've noticed comes out in conversation that isn't there in our thinking brains when we're all working separately, our laptops or PCs in different locations. And that togetherness, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical, brings about an opportunity for us to play ideas about in a different space, in a different way, that actually is incredibly creative. And it's that creativity and innovation that for me brings goals to life of what's possible, and more is possible in our own learning, in supporting others, in being part of something that is big and ambitious.
And I think, as you say, some of it is also about awareness. Some of it is about, we often can't see things in ourselves that other people can. So, in terms of, again, this organisation I've been working with over the past couple of weeks, this sort of almost like light bulb moments that go on when they sort of say, oh, I didn't know you loved doing that particular thing, or I didn't know you had that particular skill or ability, or this was something, or I knew you were really good at this thing, so we kept giving you more of that work, but I didn't know that actually for you that was draining because it's not playing to one of your strengths. And I think those conversations open up, as you say, those sort of opportunities to have more self-awareness, but also to have awareness of the team, and think about, well, that means now we know that this person, really loves doing this particular thing and it's really energizing for them. Maybe now we could start to think about taking on this type of project, or we could start to think about, offering this type of service to our customers, or whatever it happens to be. So I think it comes back to that sort of awareness and sharing that then opens up that opportunity, and great strengths conversations tend to have a habit of doing that. So
yeah, they do, don't they? Because people feel, feel valued and respected for what it is about them that's unique. And we talked about that quite a bit earlier on in the week, around that kind of feeling you've got a unique contribution being so important to being a part of a team. I love everything. My ideas are going off all over the place with a very short period of time to kind of close off. But I love the for me, I'm trying to capture really what's the humanness. What's the humanness that we're talking about here is that being part of a team is very different to working in an isolated or an independent role. And there are some real special parts of that, like being able to come up with things together in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, that really does play to everything you're talking about and change the ways of working as well. And for me, there's something very important here about people being explicit. Explicit, because if you're not explicit, then how can those goals even come about if you're not able to talk about how you can contribute to those goals, or about how you would like to collaborate with others? So there's this part about having a voice being required, which is the separation elements again that we talked about earlier on in the week. For this to be really effective, to make really good team goals, people need to feel comfortable to say what they think and they care about, and be safe to put themselves out there, which we talked about yesterday with Joe's stretch element. Being able to feel psychologically safe that there's not going to be any ramifications for them coming up with a great new idea that actually could be so helpful for the team. And it's something that Megan and the team have done recently as well. We had a great explicit conversation where we thought someone was really enjoying a certain part of the role, actually they weren't, and now we've got one of our associates supporting us on that instead, and it's really opened up something that we hadn't recognized, and it was just simply because we hadn't had the conversation. So conversation, rich conversation, honest conversation, the humanness of that, being able to do it is for me the power almost behind having team goals. Team goals sitting on a page is not particularly exciting for some people, but we can bring those to life. We can make them more meaningful by bringing together that alignment of being in something together, and finding meaning in being part of something bigger than ourselves, which we know is absolutely critical to our motivation, to our well-being. So
sorry, Alex, carry on.
No, I
was just going to say, I think just to your point about being human, I think fundamentally that also plays into this idea that we are better together. We are a social species at the end of the day. We weren't supposed to operate independently and individually isolated from others. So, fundamentally coming back to what is the humanness about this, I think it is the fact that recognizing that we do work better when, when we're together. And what fuels that, as you say, is us feeling that safety that we can bring our true selves. It's authenticity, it's openness, it's honesty. All of that lovely stuff that Joe was talking about yesterday with regard to psychological safety and stuff. So
such rich connections between all of it. But
yes, there is.
I've loved this conversation today, Nikki. Thank you so much. It's gone by super quick.
I know, I can't believe it.
But we've covered lots of things today. So we've talked about team goals. How are they different from organizational and personal goals? What makes them successful? Some of the research that sits behind those, the way we can proactively and strategically feel part of something that's aligned and together, and actually that then makes the most of our unique contribution to something that's bigger than ourselves, that gives us that meaning, that fuels our well-being, our motivation. And so something so simple, team goals, this is not a new concept. Team goals have been around for a long time, but the way we do that really matters. And so if we're not going to do it with intention and thinking about making the most of it, then we're missing the output really of our investment in our time. But finding ways to do that, and the fact that everybody can take part in contributing to team goals, is absolutely critical. So thank you so much for your time, Nikki. I really enjoyed this chat. For anyone who wants to find out more, please feel free to add in some questions and comments. We can certainly reply afterwards. So thank you for joining us, for those people who've been joining us live here today on LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube, as well as people who are listening, watching the recording afterwards, and on our new podcast of Humanising the World of Work with Bailey and French. So I really enjoyed today. Thank you so much, Nikki. I hope you have a fantastic bank holiday weekend.
Thank you, and you.
And for everyone else who's listening, please join me and Anna on Monday. We are still going live, even though it's a bank holiday here in the UK. We have some international viewers who will be joining us, who are able to join us. And some people like working and talking about these topics when they're on their day off too. So hopefully we'll have people join us then to talk about our next topic as part of Teams. So thank you so much, Nikki. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Alex, and you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.